Hi, I'm Paul Nixon. Um, when I was growing up in Southern California, I was truly lucky to be a part of a vibrant church. That is not the experience of most teenagers growing up in America. It was really a special place, and it was an experience that we had together of the Holy Spirit, of the power of God, of seeing lives changed. The average kid never sees anything like that. The average human being, probably not in their lifetime. And honestly, I thought that after I grew up, I would never see that again. I did, so I have been doubly blessed. Most of my school friends in Southern Cal were pretty secular. California is not the most religious place in the world, and many of them had only feeble perceptions of what church was, of what God was. I knew a certain reality that was very special, extraordinary, and yet they lived like in a parallel universe. This became a sort of a challenge for me that became my life's work, I suppose, helping to bridge the gap between God reality and human perceptions. It's been an interesting journey. Honestly, I never thought I would see anything like what I saw growing up, and yet 20 years later in Gulf Breeze, Florida, I was the pastor um, who was assigned to plant a new faith community. We called it the Community Life Center. It later became Community Life Church. And it happened again, two worlds collided, the world of faith and the world of everybody else coming together. A few times I would ask our crowd on Sunday, I would say, how many of you would have been found in a church anywhere a year ago? About half the hands would go up, meaning that about half our people were new or coming back after decades away from Christian faith. I thought that was a pretty cool thing. In thinking about how that bridge got built, I remember the first time that we had a new member gathering, people that were learning more about the community. There were two or three things they had in common. One was they all had bad memories of nuns wrapping their knuckles with rulers back in school. Okay, so there was that. They all disliked church, but they all said they liked the Community Life Center. So they had bad perceptions and in some cases bad realities that they brought with them as a part of the baggage of their lives. But they all liked the Community Life Center. And they said, I didn't know that church could be like this. In other words, they found a beautiful reality at odds with the previous perceptions that they carried with them. There were a lot of people in our crowd in those days who, because they were new, they had never been baptized, and they just assumed everybody else on the planet had been baptized. Their parents had baptized them, but they were not. And so we realized that, and we saw that some of them were sort of embarrassed about it. Didn't need to be, but they were. And so we said, let's have Baptism Amnesty Sunday. So we had this day where we baptized anybody who had never been baptized before. No do-overs, but if you had never been baptized, we would take care of that day, with the understanding that everybody in good faith would follow up and take seriously the covenant that God was making with them in the waters of baptism. So I thought maybe 20 people might take us up on that offer that day. 100 or more. It went on and on and on. The people back in children's ministry said, what are they doing in there? When is that thing going to be over in the big room? Well, it was a pretty amazing day. I noticed the very next week something changed. It was like the air pressure changed in the room. The people were singing. There was a sense of ownership of the community. There was a sense that they had stepped across a threshold of openness, that they were experiencing more of the presence of God than they even were a week earlier. As I think about the bridges that we built in those days, there are several things that come to mind. One is we didn't take ourselves too seriously. I mean, we didn't pretend like we had some special magic formula. You know, we didn't. We had the good news of Jesus, but it was nothing that was not common source to the whole planet. Okay, we didn't judge people. You know, we understood that all of us have our issues, and that it just wasn't a productive place to begin. And so there's just no point in judging one another. We're all on a journey. Um, we are going to disagree about this and that, and we're just not going to get into judging who's wearing a wedding ring and all that business. No way. We just didn't go there. The third thing was we listened to people's stories, and this was maybe the most special thing. In listening to stories, this is where reality and perception really begins to do a dance, because we have these perceptions in the church of all the people that are outside, and all the people that are outside have these perceptions based on, TV evangelists or whatever, of what's going on inside, and we're all ignorant of each other. And we begin to talk across these lines and to listen to one another. And we discovered there was one woman in our church. She had an interesting spiritual journey. She'd been a stripper for a while, and then she ended up becoming a therapist, counselor, and then she wrote a children's book. Then she discovered our church and found that it was a place where she could pull a lot of what she'd been sort of picking up piecemeal together. She had a beautiful story. It's just a gorgeous story. On the other hand, there were people that really had an understanding of church and of faith as something very confining, and they discovered that actually it was a discovery of freedom, a discovery of healing, a discovery of power in their lives to finally get things together. We were all learning from one another. I guess that's what I would say. We also tried to be down to earth. We were in a beach community, so we sort of had a rule: nothing fancy, no fancy rituals, no fancy clothes. We're going to do normal. We're going to do local, and we continually invited people to take the next big step in their lives, whatever that was. We knew that the good news of Jesus always invited a constructive response, and we asked people. We called the question. We said, would you go there? Would you do it? Would you take the risk? Would you dare to live into this challenge? And by the hundreds they did. And I think that was where people's perceptions were met with God reality, is when they took the risk to try the spiritual challenge, whatever it was that Jesus was putting in front of them. They begin to discover, wow, this is for real. This stuff really works. It was an amazing season. That's 2 decades ago. And the world has changed a lot, and in this pandemic season, it's speeding up all that change. And we really can't go to church anymore, can we? In fact, to be honest, we never could. Church has never been a place to go. It is a common experience of the power of God. It is a group of people, but it has no location. It has no address. It certainly doesn't have a time on Sunday morning. So the whole idea of going to church has always been a little bit of a facade. And for people who thought that was what it meant to follow Jesus, was to show up in a certain place on Sunday, I mean, you could waste decades of your life and think that you're somehow on a spiritual journey when you're not. You're just showing up to a spiritual club. A very nice group of people, hearing some inspirational music, a nice message. Your children are happy, you go home. Church is so much more than this. Church is a group of people that follow Jesus. And in this amazing season in which we live, the church has been thrown out of the building. It's awesome. And people are still following Jesus. People are still discovering power for renewal and for healing. It's an interesting time. I know people today that will say, I'm a part of 3 churches. It's almost like they channel surf on Sunday morning on the internet. And they do it all, eating waffles in their pajamas. Most of the stuff is recorded. You can access it at 3 in the morning. The gathering is really important. But finally, it's not about going to a place. It's about following Jesus. Now, for all the people who really never liked church anyway, including all those people that were in my first new members class, and most of the people in the world, quite frankly, this new world may work out for you quite nicely, because the church is being forced to remember that it's a people and not a place, and certainly not an institution. I think a lot of churches in the days ahead are going to be talking about stuff that's more relevant and getting back to what it's all about. It's about following Jesus. It's about living into the reality that Jesus taught, which we call the kingdom of God. An amazing reality. To follow Jesus, you need two things. You need a Bible, and you need some friends to come with you on the journey. That's what you need. In terms of a Bible, I would encourage you to start, first of all, get something that's readable. Get a translation that's in English you can understand, or whatever language it is that's your mother tongue. Get that Bible, okay? And start with the Gospels. Those are the books that talk about the life of Jesus. They're the first 4 books of the second section of the Bible called the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Start with Matthew. Start with John. It doesn't matter. Take them in any order. Read the 4 of those. Read them slowly. Drink it in. A chapter a day. If you get into it, you go 5 chapters. But don't think that this is a speed reading thing. It's not. We want you to read and to meet this wild man whose life is told from 4 different perspectives in each of those books. The wild man being Jesus. Because everything else you're going to read later in the Bible, everything, I want you to read in the light of what you've discovered about this Jesus character. And certainly anything that you hear from any preacher in the days ahead. I want you to be able to sort of filter that through your just fundamental experience with Jesus. You need a Bible. I prefer one that does not have a bunch of footnotes or study notes. There's a place for study notes, but they're all over the place, and you never know what you're getting, especially if you're new to this thing. And I really don't want you to meet the study notes. I want you to meet Jesus. So just get a Bible without the notes. It's in a decent translation that you can read, and I want you to get a good drink of Jesus. It's like a neat shot of Basil Hayden with no mixer. That's what I want you to experience. I want you to be shocked. I want you to feel the sort of radical edge or edges of what he talks about, and just let happen whatever needs to happen in that encounter. Now, you need a Bible. Second thing is you're going to need some friends. Nobody can do the spiritual journey alone well. It's just not possible. It's sort of like you can't do recovery. If some of you are in the AA community or NA or whatever, you know that this is not a solo journey. You need one another to do this. It's very much the same with following Christ. The church exists because we can't do it alone, and we need each other. So find some friends who are willing to maybe to go with you on this gospel reading journey. Compare notes with them. And as the questions arise, you'll want to find a pastor or someone who has who has logged some miles on this journey, who can reflect with you about what they've learned across the years. I predict that if you meet Jesus this year, he will rock your world the way he did mine when I first met him, reading the Gospel of Matthew, sitting under a pine tree on a mountain about 5 or 10 miles from my house here. He's a wild guy with good news that will change everything. And that good news will change your life in ways that are wonderful, maybe ways that you weren't expecting or even thought that you needed. Many people are saying that this COVID year, with its lack of time to get away, and we're sort of homebound, and that this year feels like a waste. We've canceled so much of what we had planned to do this year. No year needs to be a waste, and certainly not this year. Use this year as an opportunity to take a Jesus challenge. Use this space that is maybe being created in your life to explore and to ask some hard questions. Don't waste this year. It could easily become the very best year of your life.